and in their subsequent letters that they filed with the court when they argued against Combs' bail, which, by the way, was denied twice. Now, he's currently locked up in the Brooklyn Detention Center. Combs is facing charges of racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking by force, fraud, or coercion, transportation to engage in prostitution. We've mentioned it before, but he could be looking at 15 years to life in prison. That's how serious these charges are. But the main theme here, the main allegation, is that Combs led a criminal enterprise. And the goal of this criminal enterprise, other than to operate a global media and entertainment business, was to engage in the abuse of women, sex trafficking, forced labor, prostitution, the distribution of drugs, to use violence and threats, to commit crimes like kidnapping, arson, bribery, obstruction of justice, to carry out their goals, their missions, all the while making sure to satisfy the sexual desires of Sean Combs. And one of those desires, as alleged by the government, by prosecutors, and also alleged by several Combs accusers in separate civil lawsuits that they filed against him, were the commission of freak-offs. So with that in mind, now we're going to get into these shocking details surrounding these freak-offs. And I guess we should start with saying, what are freak-offs, right? Well, let's go to the indictment. It says, quote, Combs and other members and associates of the Combs enterprise wielded the power and prestige of Combs' role at the Combs business to intimidate, threaten, and lure female victims into Combs' orbit, often under the pretense of a romantic relationship. Combs then used force, threats of force, and coercion to cause victims to engage in extended sex acts with male commercial sex workers that Combs referred to as, among other things, freak-offs. Freak-offs were elaborate and produced sex performances that Combs arranged, directed, pleasured himself during, and often electronically recorded. Now, while this indictment came down, I said at the time, this may be a term that is foreign to any person that was not familiar with Sean Combs, but for me, who's been following this whole saga for, a year now, I have heard this term multiple times, because in the Cassandra Ventura lawsuit, Combs' ex-girlfriend, and Rodney Little Rod Jones lawsuit, this is Combs' former producer, they discussed the freak-offs in their sexual assault lawsuits. Now, Ventura alleged, among other things, that Combs would demand her participation in freak-offs and that she would have to be forced to hire the male sex workers and that this could happen at any random moment. Jones alleged, among other things, that Combs' son Justin Combs and DJ and record producer Stevie J would engage in freak-offs. Now, to be clear, those specific allegations, those names, those details were not mentioned as part of the criminal case. I will tell you, though, that the idea of this freak-off, now that it is officially part of the criminal case, now that it's mentioned multiple times, this makes me wonder two things from a legal point of view. Number one, it is such a wild concept and a phraseology that it's hard to believe that this is something that was just made up by Combs' accusers. And when I say Combs' accusers, could that be Ventura? Yes. Could that be Jones? Yes. Perhaps the government got this information, this idea of the freak-offs originally from them. And by the way, when I say Combs' accusers, could be Ventura, could be Jones. Perhaps the government got this idea of the freak-offs from them originally, but we don't know. To be clear, we do not know for sure. We do not know who the accusers are, the victims are in this criminal case, who the government's witnesses are, whoever those people may be, because we don't know for sure who is cooperating with the government right now. But the bottom line is the idea of the freak-off, there's enough there to substantiate it that the government is moving forward with this. And again, it is so wild. It's such a wild concept to come up with that I wonder if an argument will be made that, look, jury, this has to be true. No one can honestly make something like this up. And as you'll see, it doesn't appear it was just witness testimony that corroborates the idea of the freak-offs happening, the existence of these freak-offs, but there's more, and I'll get to that. But this also leads me to a secondary point, that based upon what we are already seeing from Combs' defense counsel during bail arguments, they may not deny that these freak-offs happened, or even that Combs called them freak-offs. They may say, yeah, you know what? He engaged in freak-offs. That's what he called them. But they were consensual. That's the idea. They were consensual. This is not a crime. And I want to explore that a little bit more. Let's explore a little bit more details of these freak-offs. So the indictment continues, quote, freak-offs occurred regularly, sometimes lasted multiple days, and often involved multiple commercial sex workers. During freak-offs, Combs distributed a variety of controlled substances to victims, in part to keep the victims obedient and compliant. Sometimes, unbeknownst to the victims, Combs kept videos he filmed of victims engaging in sex acts with commercial sex workers. After freak-offs, Combs and the victims typically received IV fluids to recover from the physical exertion and drug use. That is something. And the government would allege that these freak-offs, they have been happening since 2009, that those drugs consisted of ketamine, GHB, ecstasy. Now, in terms of the defense of consent, the defense could say, well, these people knowingly and voluntarily took drugs, but if it's true that Combs kept videos that these participants didn't know about, that could be problematic for him, especially since we learned the government may have the goods to back all of this up. In their bail letter to the judge, they write, quote, the evidence against the defendant, which would be made public at trial, includes substantial evidence that is highly sensitive and has the potential to significantly and negatively impact the defendant's reputation. For example, dozens of video recordings created by the defendant of freak-offs with victims. I mean, we wondered what was collected by federal authorities after they raided Combs' homes in LA and Miami back in March. There were reports that they collected digital evidence. In fact, further on in the government's letter, prosecutors write, quote, setting aside devices seized in connection with the defendant's arrest, the government has obtained over 90 cell phones, laptops, cloud storage accounts, as well as over 30 other electronic and storage devices such as hard drives, thumb drives, cameras, and a surveillance system. The government also wrote, victim testimony regarding freak-offs is at times corroborated by other witness testimony, communications with the defendant and commercial sex workers, travel records, hotel records, videos of the freak-offs, and records reflecting or indicating payment. By the way, you're talking about evidence of freak-offs. Prosecutors revealed one other way that they can prove that these freak-off events happen, because in the government's bail letter, it states, the defendant arranged freak-offs with the assistance of members and associates of the enterprise, including employees of his business, and the hotel rooms where they were staged often sustained significant damages. So the prosecution's letter goes on to state that, for example, in approximately 2012,
imagine causing so much damage in a hotel that you have to pay $50,000, $60,000. That's insane.
in Manhattan, the defendant paid over $46,000 to cover damages to a penthouse hotel room following a freak-off. Yeah. Now, I imagine the government plans to produce receipts of this, some documentation or witness testimony to corroborate that account, because it'll be tough for the defense to say, why else did that hotel room sustain, allegedly, $46,000 worth of damages if it wasn't for this wild sexual performance event? But again, you can see why the government's putting that evidence forward to suggest that these freak-offs occurred. Now, going back to that idea of consent, this defense of consent, I couple that with something else that I've been hearing. I've seen people say, why are these freak-offs a crime, right? You might be wild sexual encounters, but why is this sex trafficking? Why is this racketeering? Well, as laid out in the indictment, but also...
Good evening. Welcome to a special edition of Inside City Hall for Thursday, September 26, 2024. I'm Errol Lewis. Mayor Eric Adams is under indictment, facing federal charges that he took bribes and illegal campaign contributions from foreign nationals in exchange for favors, including helping Turkish officials get fire safety approvals for a new consulate building in Manhattan. The 5-count indictment lays out a decade-long trail of alleged crimes.
The conduct alleged in the indictment, the foreign money, the corporate money, the bribery, the years of concealment, is a grave breach of the public's trust. Public office is a privilege. We allege that Mayor Adams abused that privilege and broke the law. Laws that are designed to ensure that officials like him serve the people, not the highest bidder, not a foreign bidder, and certainly not a foreign power.
But Mayor Adams is defiantly fighting the charges, declaring his innocence and resisting many calls for him to resign. He is expected to appear in federal court tomorrow.
I look forward to defending myself and defending the people of this city, as I've done throughout my entire professional career.
We have special team coverage on all of this for you tonight, all around the city and down to Washington, D.C. We begin tonight with Ayanna Harry, who is outside the courthouse at Federal Plaza. Good evening, Ayanna.
Good evening, Errol. While the mayor says he is focused on serving the city, federal investigators have been focused on Eric Adams, finding the mayor accepted bribes and illegal campaign contributions. And tonight, this federal investigation is far from over.
It's an unfortunate day, and it's a painful day.
Public office is a privilege. We allege that Mayor Adams abused that privilege and broke the law.
A federal criminal case against the mayor of New York City focused on bribery, illegal campaign contribution, and an alleged cover-up.
The foreign money, the corporate money, the bribery, the years of concealment is a grave breach of the public's trust.
For the first time in more than 150 years, a sitting New York City mayor has been indicted. Eric Adams faces 5 federal criminal charges, including bribery and wire fraud. Adams is accused of receiving more than $100,000 worth of luxury travel from Turkish officials and businessmen, all looking to establish influence with Adams as he rose in New York City politics.
He told the public he received no gifts, even though he was secretly being showered with them.
U.S. Attorney Damian Williams says in exchange for some of those gifts, Mayor Adams,
he intervened.
Just imagine that. The person that the city appointed and trusted is doing work for foreign nationals. I'll be back, you guys. Got a few things to take care of. Love, life, and loyalty. Stay safe, stay true. You rock with me, I rock with you.